In the quiet town of Willow Creek, where the days blended into one another like the steady hum of factory machines, lived a man named Elias Harper. At 32, Elias was a skilled carpenter, but his life was as modest as the wooden chairs he built for the local market. He earned enough to pay rent on a small cottage, fix his old truck, and occasionally treat himself to a beer at the town pub. His dreams never stretched beyond the next job or a slightly bigger workshop. "Keep your head down and your hands busy," his father had always said. "That's how you survive." Elias believed it. Thinking big felt like a luxury for city folk or characters in movies, people with money, connections, or luck. He was none of those things. One rainy afternoon, while clearing out his late grandfather's attic, Elias found an old leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed, filled with handwriting that was bold and hurried. It belonged to his grandfather, a man who had once dreamed of building bridges but settled for fixing fences. On the final page, a single underlined sentence caught Elias's eye. Asterisk, the size of your life is determined by the size of your thoughts. Think small, live small. Think big and the world bends. Asterisk. Elias chuckled and set the journal aside. But that night, unable to sleep, he picked it up again. He read stories his grandfather had written, failed attempts at starting a lumber business, rejections from banks, moments of doubt. Yet each failure was followed by a bigger idea. The journal ended abruptly, but the message lingered. The next morning something shifted. Elias stood in his tiny workshop, staring at the same four walls he had stared at for years. Instead of building another set of shelves for Mrs. Thompson, he imagined something grander. What if he didn't just make furniture? What if he designed modular homes, affordable, beautiful houses that could be assembled quickly for families in need? Willow Creek had growing families but expensive housing. The idea felt ridiculous. He had no capital, no team, no experience in large-scale building. But the journal's words echoed, asterisk, think big. Asterisk. Elias started small in action but huge in vision. He spent evenings sketching designs on scrap paper. He researched sustainable materials, solar integration, and cost-saving techniques. During the day he still took carpentry jobs, but he began asking clients questions. What frustrates you most about housing costs? If you could design your dream home on a budget, what would it look like? People laughed at first. "Elias, you're a good carpenter, but this sounds like big city talk," said Mr. Reynolds, the hardware store owner. Elias smiled and kept going. He pitched his idea to the local bank. The loan officer, a stern woman named Mrs. Caldwell, reviewed his rough business plan. "You have heart, Mr. Harper, but no collateral and no track record. Come back when you've built something real." Rejection stung, but Elias refused to shrink his thinking. He sold his truck, borrowed tools from friends, and used his savings to buy materials for a prototype. He worked nights and weekends on a 600-square-foot model home in an empty lot, lent by a sympathetic farmer. The structure was simple yet innovative. Foldable walls, rainwater collection, energy-efficient everything. When it was finished, he invited the town to an open house. Only a dozen people showed up. But one of them was Sarah Klein, a journalist from the state capital who was visiting family. She wrote a story about the carpenter with crazy dreams. The article went mildly viral in regional circles. A few investors reached out. A non-profit focused on affordable housing expressed interest. Emboldened, Elias thought even bigger. He applied for grants, partnered with a young engineer he met online, and pitched to a regional development council. Doubts flooded in daily. Suppliers backed out. A storm damaged part of the prototype. His best friend told him, "You're going to lose everything chasing a fantasy." There were nights Elias believed him. He sat in the dark workshop, staring at his grandfather's journal, wondering if thinking big was just a fancy way to describe delusion. But each time he remembered, the world only bends for those who push. 6 months later, Elias secured his first major contract, to build 20 modular homes for a flood-affected community 2 counties over. The project was risky, the timeline tight and the budget lean. He assembled a small team, the engineer, 2 fellow carpenters who believed in him, and a recent architecture graduate eager for real work. The project tested every limit. Delays in material delivery. Budget overruns. Skeptical local officials. Elias worked 18-hour days. When funds ran short, he took out a second mortgage on his cottage. When team morale dipped, he shared his grandfather's journal entries. "We're not just building houses," he told them. "We're proving that ordinary people can create extraordinary change." The homes were completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule. They were beautiful, clean lines, green technology, and warm, welcoming spaces that families immediately loved. The local news covered the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Investors who had previously ignored him now called with opportunities. A national housing initiative invited Elias to speak at their conference. Standing on that stage in front of hundreds, Elias felt the full power of his changed thinking. He wasn't a small-town carpenter anymore. He was the founder of Harper Modular Homes, a company that would eventually build communities across 3 states. Within 5 years, his business employed over 100 people and had revolutionized affordable housing in the region. One evening, years later, Elias returned to Willow Creek. He visited his old workshop, now a small museum of his first prototype. A young boy no older than 10 was there with his father, admiring the models. "Mr. Harper," the boy said shyly, "did you always know you'd build all this?" Elias smiled and knelt down. "No. I used to think my life would always be small. Then I learned that the only real limit is what I allowed inside my own head." Think big, son. The world has a way of catching up to brave thoughts. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Elias walked through the town he had once felt trapped in. Houses stood where empty lots had been. Families thrived because one man decided his thoughts didn't have to match his circumstances. The power of thinking big wasn't magic. It was courage, the courage to imagine beyond the visible, to act when evidence said otherwise, and to persist when the path grew dark. Elias Harper had bent his small world into something vast, and in doing so, reminded everyone who heard his story that the biggest changes begin not with money, tools, or connections, but with a single, daring thought.